We're good to start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the Toronto South. As we all know, there's been a dramatic increase in the positive test of prisoners throughout numerous institutions, provincial and federal, and it's left to us, it seems, to share this news with the world and hopefully garner some support for the changes that are necessary to save some of these lives. We have 5 speakers today. I'd like to welcome Dee, who's been recently released, Maya, who has a person, a loved one who is incarcerated, Zaya from Think Twice, who's a frontline worker and advocate, Justin Pichet, professor at Ottawa University and the founder of the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project, as well Cyrus Marcus Ware from Black Lives Matter TO and the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. And I am James Rustin. I'm a person with lived experience who is also an advocate with the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. So to get started, I'd like to ask Dee to weigh in on what his experience has been directly with the Toronto South Detention Centre and how he's experienced this COVID outbreak. Hopefully he's here with us. Dee, are you there? Perhaps we'll move on to Maya until Dee's back, or possibly
Hello, are you able to hear me?
I can. Is this Dee?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. My microphone was muted. I apologize for that small delay. So basically, yeah, I'm gonna identify. My name is Dee. I recently got released from Toronto South Detention Centre. I'm here to speak on my experiences that I went through there during the Corona pandemic, because I was there when it started and I was there up until 4 months as it was going on. So basically, first I want to talk on how the jail presented the pandemic to the media. Excuse me. So basically the jail, when they started telling the media that they were accommodating the inmates with gloves and masks to prevent us from obviously spreading the virus within the institution. They were also telling the media that they were practicing safe distancing, social distancing within the institution. I just want to show you guys what that looked like for us. Basically, there was no mask provided. That was an outright lie. There was never any mask provided, and the reasoning before that, because within the institution, masks and gloves are considered contraband, so you could actually get in trouble for having those. So they're unable to provide them legally. So basically, that's why those weren't provided. Social distancing for an inmate within Toronto South, social distancing within Toronto South institution basically look like this. You have a range which is like 40 feet wide, 30 feet long, or 40 feet long, 30 feet wide, basically 40 inmates. Then you have every 40 inmate, what they tried to do to social distance us was leave us within our cells. So how the cells look is you have basically, it's like 12 feet long, about 6 feet wide, 5.5 feet wide. So basically what that looked like is there's 2 inmates in the cell. So we are left up on the cell for like long periods of time, like 10 days. Basically, when it first started out, we were there for 10 days without any showers. Then they let us out briefly to shower, probably like an hour on the range to make some quick phone calls individually. And then after, back in the cell for long periods of times, because they didn't know how to handle it. They're still handling it that handle it. That's just things that I have heard, basically. And so that's how social distancing look like. And
So let me
as
ask
far
you,
as, yes,
so let me
please.
ask, sorry, go ahead.
No, you could ask the question.
Let me ask you, are they separating the people who are testing positive with the prisoners who have not tested positive?
Okay, basically this is how that look like. They are not separating us. I have personally lived on range with people who've tested positive for COVID. They're not separating us. Basically what they would do is they would lock that person in the cell. But like when that person comes out to the range, everything that person's touched, we still have to touch, and they're not taking the proper procedures to disinfect the range after the person comes out because it's time consuming to them. So basically that's how that would look. And what they're also doing is some people who get tested positive, at first they're using segregation as a like decontamination center, but that's all filled up now. All the segregation and all the places that they could use that they were just holding off the touch, and they're all the places that they could use, they were just hoarding all the people there that have tested positive, but they're able to do so because a lot of those places are overcapacitated. So they had to leave people with the disease on the range as well to integrate, because it's just a space problem as well, right?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We'll move now to Maya.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys letting me speak my piece.
Yeah, no problem. Stand by. We may have some questions for you, Dee.
100%. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Maya, would you like to share your experience with your loved one inside? Perhaps some of what they're telling you?
Sure. So, good morning. My name is Mia. I currently have a loved one incarcerated at the Toronto South Detention Centre. There is not a day that goes by that I don't worry about his well-being and safety. Since he's been incarcerated, he's been denied his charter rights during his bail hearing. A guard denied him access to using the phone to speak with his lawyer, which led to him being ambushed by multiple guards, after the judge gave him permission to speak with his lawyer privately during his bail hearing. Not only did they end up sending him to the hospital, they sexually assaulted him. While at the hospital, he was put in 2 soft casts and he had to have an ultrasound on his testicles, which were badly bruised. Now he's waiting to see if he'll need surgery. This situation is just one example of how these men become victims and how easy it's overlooked. Even if these situations are brought to the police or warden's attention, nothing gets done. My loved one would have been on bail with his family celebrating Christmas this year, but he's not, because the rules in the Toronto South Detention Centre seem to be on a guard-to-guard basis. Several other inmates told me that there are no masks or gloves being given to them or mandatory to be worn. Guards are given the option of voluntarily taking the COVID test, and it should be mandatory. Soon the question is going to be, who will be taking care of our loved ones while the guards keep calling in sick? Oh yeah, it will be more days the inmates have to be locked up due to the jail not taking the necessary steps and precautions like they should have in the first place. The guards are not taking positive cases off ranges, which has led to having mixed cells and ranges with positive and negative inmates sharing a cell. And even when an inmate has been moved because they tested positive for COVID, the cell would not be sanitized, nor would they offer the inmate any cleaning supplies for their cell. I have also been told the guards have not been wearing PPE up until sometime last week. The way the jail is dealing with the COVID outbreak is by locking the inmates up for days at a time, leaving them with no showers, no change of clothes, or access to the phone. We on the outside have no way of knowing if our loved ones are safe inside. My loved one was also in a cell that was getting no heat, and it took over a week for him to be moved into a cell with heat while he's trying to recover from his injuries. It is not humane the way these inmates are being treated. Regardless of the reasons they are incarcerated, they are still people. With COVID being a huge issue for us worldwide, now is not the time to take the public health recommendations lightly. These men deserve to be safe and taken care of properly. These men are sons, fathers, husbands, brothers, and uncles. If the guards can't comply with the public health standards or comply to doing their job effectively, then these men should not be trusted to be incarcerated during the pandemic. Nor should the guards be working. These men deserve to receive proper care as anyone else would with COVID or an illness. They do not deserve to suffer or die alone because of the lack of resources or the lack of efficiency the jail can offer. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms are supposed to guarantee certain politics and civil rights to Canadians. Section 7, right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Section 9, freedom from arbitrary detention or imprisonment. Section 12, right to not be subject to cruel and unusual punishment. These men's charter rights are being violated. In the court of law, it's not what you know, but what you can prove. There are cameras in every inch of the Toronto South facility. So why are the cameras only used or working when a guard needs proof of an incident? Yet when an inmate needs proof, the cameras aren't working that day. We all knew a second wave of COVID was coming. Where were the precautions to protect the inmates? The outbreak in the Toronto South is proof that they were clearly not taking precautions inside to prevent this from happening. We as a province have had to make changes during the pandemic to keep ourselves and our families safe. So why is our justice system forgot about? Why is there no one to overlook our justice system to make sure these men are being taken care of properly and to make sure they are getting the proper health care or even basic necessities? If the justice system has no one to answer to, then they will continue to do whatever they want with our loved ones, and they will have no repercussions or lack of work ethic or preparation for this second wave. The jails do not keep our loved ones safe. It's up to us on the outside to bring what's been going on in the dark into the light for people to see the truth. The justice system has not only failed the inmates, but the family and friends and loved ones on the outside, and no one is listening or doing anything about it.
Thank you, Mia. Next, we'll go to Zaya from Think Twice, frontline worker and advocate. Zaya.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Zia Brown, and I am the founder and director of an organization called Think Twice. Think Twice works with young people in the community, and we also work with young people who are incarcerated in a federal institution. I also have a loved one in the South Detention Centre, and I wanted to speak to you guys a little bit about what's going on in the South and a little bit about what's going on in the federal. So we have multiple people that call in and that are asking for support, and I'm going to read some of the issues with you. So there are young people and individuals throughout the building who are calling about many of the same issues. C2C 16, positive cases. There are people with positive cases locked down with negative, no cleaning supplies, no showers, no calls. Some of the officers come through and don't wear masks. Same gloves, if any, cell searches. No one is explaining what's happening to them, and they're terrified. Other ranges have heard them banging all night, that they're going crazy, and their families have also documented that they're terrified. Before these inmates tested positive, they were denied tests. They were denied tests because they ended up being tested because they refused hatches. I'm not sure what that is. And then they finally tested the entire range. Some of the positive inmates were handing out hot water trays, and the first inmate that tested positive was there for 3 months. He was not new, therefore it had to come in by a guard. Cases are not being reported properly, and now, presently, public health took over this particular range. Inmates have masks when they're coming out of their cell. C3C is currently on a hunger strike. This range is called a droplet range, where they think someone may have it. They were all tested. Tests have not come back as promised. No masks. They're locked down. No cleaning supplies. Shortage of staff and cleaners. As with all of them, my concern is the mental health concerns for excessive lockdowns, and especially in these situations. CEOs are walking in cells. They don't have showers, or everyone doesn't have showers. No phone calls, no clean towels, no PPE. And there is a phone for inmates to call their lawyers. That phone gets muted and hung up constantly. 4C, no cleaning supplies, no mask, gloves, droplet range again. And same issue with them that they face. The food, they say that the food, the gloves are not taken off when food trays are being handed out. And I'm sure this is before public health got involved. I know public health is not in C3C, so I know they're on certain ranges. And okay, so I wanted to speak about some of the issues across the board. We've heard the same complaints on numerous ranges. Throughout the building, inmates are punished if they complain. Guards are scared too. Excessive lockdowns are causing serious mental health concerns. There are over 100 cases in the building, but they're underreporting. There's a concern of the lack of transparency from the ministry. The contradictory regulations between federal and provincial. Why is it that federal institutions have given inmates masks where provincial inmates do not have masks? Why is there a lack of preventions in provincial? So here's my issue. We wrote to the ministry, the Solicitor General 3 times in April. They had ample time to get themselves situated when it comes to this pandemic. There is no excuse that so many people have and are facing these issues in any of these institutions. Why are quarantine people not put? Sorry, I'll get to that next. And then my next concern is quarantine. So why are people being locked down, negative cases being locked down with positive cases? And then I want to, can I touch on federal real quick or no? And I'm going to touch on federal. So we also have had individuals call us from federal. So the issue with federal is a busload came in from Joyceville with positive inmates. Those inmates believe that the COs knew that the inmates had it, but still placed them on ranges without putting them in quarantine. So now we have cases in Collins Bay, we have cases in Warkworth. The difference between federal and provincial is that federal has masks. However, they need showers and they need to be able to call their family. Some of the concerns are that they are now going to be tested for the vaccine, which is a different conversation and a different case. But at the end of the day, these young people and these individuals alike are human beings, and they do have human rights, and their human rights have been totally disrespected on all levels. So thank you very much. I hope the community and the people do something about this.
Thank you very much, Zia. We'll go now to Mr. Pichet in Ottawa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Pichet. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Criminology at the University of Ottawa. I'm also a member of the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project and the co-editor of the Journal of Prisoners on Prisons. So through the course of my work, I am frequently in touch with criminalized people and their loved ones. So we'll be providing a bit of a snapshot of what's happening provincially and federally, and a few of the things that have been emailed to me of the many messages that I've received over the past few days from the loved ones of prisoners, as well as phone calls from prisoners themselves explaining their understanding of what's happening right now. So in the province of Ontario right now, as of the 17th of December, based on data that the Ministry of the Solicitor General posts on their website that will probably be updated later today, there are 2 active cases at the Maplehurst Correctional Complex in Milton, 54 active cases at the Toronto South Detention Centre, 7 active cases at the Central North Correctional Centre or the Penetang Super Jail in Penetanguishene, Ontario, 5 cases at the Toronto East Detention Centre, and 1 active case at the Algoma Treatment and Remand Centre. Our previous speakers have already given a snapshot of some of the things that are happening and that have transpired at the Toronto South Detention Centre. I want to bring your focus to another jail within the province that has active cases right now. And a mom of one of the prisoners sent me this message. My son is in provincial jail. He does not have access to PPE as of last time that I spoke to him yesterday. He has been denied the COVID-19 test. People on his range have tested positive and are still on the range. Physically distancing is impossible, but the staff do have PPE. I wanted to mail him some masks, but my request was denied. What can I do to change this? I feel like we're being treated like second-class citizens. This is a global pandemic. So why are these institutions not following the advice of public health? Don't they understand that all these prisoners are people who made a mistake and are deserving of the same medical, mental health support as the rest of us? We have been able to physically distance from each other. They can't. I understand why my son feels that a revolt may be his only option in getting the attention to what is really going on. What is portrayed in the news is so far from reality. And that's one of the reasons that we're speaking to all of you today. So that's just a snapshot of what's happening provincially. And I think, those comments about not having access to PPE, being on ranges with folks who have tested positive with COVID-19, not having access to what they need to get through this crisis, that's happening across different institutions. It's being said and communicated by different people. It is going on. It's not just a few isolated folks saying this from one institution. These problems are systemic. So maybe just turning our attention to the federal situation here. As you'll no doubt be familiar, if you've watched the news over the course of the weekend, there has been a major outbreak at Joyceville Institution. But there are also major outbreaks in other parts of the country. So in Manitoba at Stony Mountain Institution, there are currently 63 active cases amongst prisoners. But over the course of this second wave of the pandemic and the recent outbreak there, 232 federal prisoners and 22 staff members, that's 254 people at least that we know of, that have gotten COVID-19 at Stony Mountain Institution in Stony Mountain, Manitoba, which is a community north of Winnipeg. And then we have currently at Sask Pen 63 total cases that have happened in a recent outbreak, 61 of which are active. Now, as for what's happened in Ontario, the folks inside that I've been in touch with were telling me that COs or correctional officers told them that COVID came in through newly admitted prisoners who were on this bad bus that a previous speaker mentioned. The folks I spoke to said that the COs asked Joyceville's management to be testing guys before they left the quarantine range. And coming in and then going out to other parts within Joyceville Institution and then transferred to other institutions. Those rapid tests did not happen. Management refused. There are now 15 out of the 16 ranges at Joyceville medium with at least one COVID case. And the latest numbers we have from CSC is that a total of 85 cases are still at Joyceville Institution. They transferred people from there with COVID. They didn't know it because they didn't test them. 6 related cases at Collins Bay Institution in Kingston, another 3 cases at Warkworth and Trent Hills, Ontario, and another case in Beaver Creek in Gravenhurst. This a loved one of someone from Beaver Creek that said that the prisoner came from Joyceville, was placed immediately into a unit with 9 other men without a test or quarantine. Once he showed symptoms, they moved him to the behavioral unit. Once he had a positive test, they moved him to quarantine, where he was supposed to be to begin with. Procedures are not being followed and for the most part have never been. And we know that this is happening in different spots around the country. In other provincial jails, for instance, in Saskatchewan, there were, about 20 guys who got transferred from the Saskatoon Correctional Centre to Regina. Guess what? They weren't tested on the way out either. And some of them had COVID in these buses that went to the Regina Correctional Centre. And now there's a COVID outbreak there. So, there directly from prisoners as well as their family members that both from Joyceville and Beaver Creek, prisoners who don't have symptoms but who have been on the same ranges as people that have tested positive for COVID. They're requesting tests, and those requests are being denied. At least they were up until Saturday. So this whole claim by CSC that people are being safely quarantined in a separate unit is not true. And just to end, I'm sure there'll be other questions, but I just want to read a few things from loved ones of prisoners that I've been getting. This is from Bath Institution, which doesn't have a positive case right now, but they're affected by these protocols. Got this one message. My husband is currently in Bath. His immune system is weak. We are very scared. CSC seems to be determined to carry out its agenda of dehumanization, even to the point of death for people who are incarcerated. Last time I checked, the death penalty was abolished in Canada in 1976. This has the potential to be a death sentence for many prisoners. This here is from Joyceville Institution. They're struggling in there. No one knows what to do. There is no plan. Guards are lost on what to do. Several staff members walked off the job yesterday. Guards tell prisoners they have no idea what's going on. My friend asked for cleaning supplies every day and gloves, and he got a pill-sized bottle of bleach. The warden came up and talked to them, and he told my friend he'd give him supplies right away, but that was yesterday in the afternoon and still nothing today. That was yesterday this note was sent to me. They said the day that prisoners got tested, that they would be able to get other tests the next day, and even got a paper saying that, but they weren't able to take their second test. Prisoners have been let out of the shower for 15 minutes, maybe once a day, to shower or if they have time to call home. My friend said the range on the other side of theirs was really sick. No one knows what to do in there, and it's very hard on all the prisoners and their families. Most families don't even know how their son or husbands or boyfriends are doing. And just to say, I've got this one message that was sent yesterday from the loved one of a prisoner in Joyceville who said there has been no update on the minimum side because the big outbreaks happened in the medium ranges. And none of the guys have been allowed to use the phone since the lockdown on Tuesday. So none of their loved ones have any idea what's going on in there. It doesn't make sense that they can't find a safe way for them to use the phone. It's cruel. We'll keep going here, and then we'll be done. This is from Beaver Creek, where one of the Joyceville transfers ended up and had COVID. My husband at Beaver Creek Medium has also been denied a test twice now. There are no sanitizing products. The prisoner that came from Joyceville was placed into a range with everyone else. Procedures were not being followed even as late as this summer. I even complained to the management team in the summer that staff were not wearing masks. A manager was speaking to me in July with no mask on and was standing well within 6 feet of me. These are the same staff that prevented personal family visits from starting because they involved the union as they felt unsafe allowing visitors to come in. And the point being that they're not following procedures themselves. A media release from CSC recently said that prisoners have access to phone calls and video visits while visits are canceled, but these are not happening. And with lockdowns, there's very little access to the phone. And I mean, I could keep reading through these reams of emails that I've received, but the situation's pretty grave. And it appears that prisoners do not have what they need to get through this in a good way, or as the best way that they possibly can in these difficult circumstances. And prisoners' loved ones are largely being shut out from information. So I look forward to answering questions after the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. I wish I could say I'm surprised by that news, but it seems to be a long-standing pattern of corrections. So if we can go now to Cyrus, for our final speaker. Perhaps while we're waiting for Cyrus to prepare, I'm going to read out the list of demands from the Toronto Prisoner Support Project. We demand prisons and jails be depopulated. We demand housing and essential services for people released into the community. Provide them with COVID-19 testing for all prisoners and all staff. Guarantee immediate and equitable health care. Offer humane isolation for new prisoners and people that test positive. Provide PPE, hygiene products, and cleaning supplies to prisoners. Clean and sanitize ranges daily, including the telephones. Provide access to daily showers for all prisoners. End this reliance on lockdowns and segregation. Mandate that all prison staff use PPE. Ensure good air quality and ventilation systems. Stop unnecessary cell inspections. Provide access to free and accessible phone calls. And disseminate regular public reports on the ministry's actions and responses to this COVID-19 global pandemic. So it appears we're having some technical difficulties with Cyrus. I'd like to go back we'll go back and speak with Justin for a moment, and he's going to provide a statement from Cyrus.
This is from the Joyceville folks in Medium in terms of their demands while we connect with Cyrus here. So just in terms of some demands that they're looking for, first and foremost, as of Saturday, they were looking for access to information and meetings with Joyceville's warden and management team so that they can get information, whether it's good or bad, about what the plan is going forward. They're asking for more time to access the video visits and phone calls with their loved ones until visits are restored, which on paper CSC says are available, but in practice are not happening for many prisoners on lockdown right now. They're asking for consistent access to hot water because the main 3,000 liter system at Joyceville has been offline for some time, and the temporary 1,000 liter system is insufficient for people to be able to wash their hands with hot water, take showers, or do laundry during the course of an entire day. So it's the hot water's there in the morning, but as the day goes on, they have a third of the capacity. So we're in a pandemic, and these guys can't wash their hands with hot water towards the end of the day. Access to sanitizer, more access to gloves, bleach, and other cleaning supplies beyond what's given to the one cleaner per unit that has access to this stuff that's cleaning things up for 30 to 40 guys. They're saying all prisoners need N95 masks. Some have them, some don't, apparently. That's what we're being told. And they're left to use the one mask they have made out of sewn out bed sheets with elastics on them that were issued by Corcan, CSC's prison industry company, earlier in the pandemic. They say staff have face shields, prisoners don't. We'd like access to those. They'd also like some kind of barrier to cover their cell, because some of them tried using makeshift curtains and those were not allowed. They were being torn down, or they were getting warnings for those. They're asking for more time out of cell to be able to do laundry and make phone calls. And they're also seeing that they're going to be on lockdown for at least 14 days and likely longer than that if there's other transmission of COVID, which they're on mixed units right now. So that looks like that will probably happen, unfortunately. So the lockdown is going to go on potentially for a month or longer. They're asking for more and better food in order to be able to better cope both physically and psychologically with the ordeal they're facing. Yeah, you know, it's quite the dire situation. I mean, the things that we take for granted that they don't have, and even like the basic things like can't wash your hands properly. Like, fuck. Anyways.
Yeah, again, I can't say, you know, I'm all that shocked by the response. It appears that the institutions are just simply not set up to handle pandemic circumstances, as this is an unprecedented situation for all of the world. And it's required changes, and it's required unprecedented um, actions. And I think that's what's required here. And I don't think any of these demands are unreasonable. We'll go now to the CBC. We'll take some questions from the media. And anyone who would like to ask a question, just feel free to put your hand up in the chat, and we'll follow the list. So who do we have up first here? Linda Ward? I believe we have Linda from the CBC.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. It seems there's a bit of a he said, she said back and forth going on here between what we're hearing is going on inside the prisons and what the ministry is telling us is happening. We're hearing that they're being given masks inside if required. They're given access to testing, and that all staff are being told they have to wear PPE. Where do you think the discrepancy is here?
I think that the ministry needs to be held responsible, because I think they are speaking total untruth. There can't be so many inmates in different parts of the building and different parts of the institutions that are saying the same thing. So no, the inmates are not given masks in provincial, only federal. Now that public health has got involved in certain ranges, they have masks when they come out of their cell. However, they're still locked down with people that are negative and positive. So that's still, yeah, it's pointless. And then so no, the ministry needs to be held accountable. And I will say that yes, there are some guards who were not being punished for not wearing their mask or pulling it down when they're speaking, or doing excessive cell searches and so on. But I will say that those who need to be held accountable 100% is the ministry.
I agree. Yes, I agree completely. I can tell you from personal experience, I did receive a phone call from a prisoner at the Penetanguishene jail who said that the staff came in at the nighttime and asked him to give his mask back. Now, I thought about that, and I thought, why would they be coming in the nighttime and reclaiming these masks? And the only thing I can think of is that they've run out of masks through some logistical error, or probably they don't want to put the funding into it. And so potentially they're reusing these masks. I could see that happening. We see that happen with clothing and other supplies that circulate. They sometimes are caught with sharing razors, even the nail clippers, anyway. We'll go to Justin here. What's your take on this discrepancy between the information we're getting?
Well, I mean, there's what the ministry thinks is happening at their headquarters and what the communications people are writing versus what's actually happening on the ground. And so, we're hearing from several different prisoners and their loved ones from different institutions in different parts of the province that are saying this. So I would attribute more credibility to that than I would to someone writing a press release in a office in downtown Toronto.
Fair enough. And so back to media. Any other questions we have? Follow-up questions for any of our speakers? Well, as I stated already, and I think as Zia has mentioned, that there seems to be a real lack of accountability. As far as these discrepancies go, I don't think it would be the first time that we've seen corrections protecting themselves by concealing what's really going on behind the institutions. And in fact, most recently with the solitary confinement judgment that was granted against them for abusing that practice. So I think it would be a good idea to go over some of the ways that we could begin depopulating both the provincial and federal prisons. But before we do that, let's go back to Zia. She has a follow-up comment.
I actually just made it, but at the end of the day, we need to have an outside body that is not in the system, that is involved in complaints, and that the ministry needs to be held accountable to. They can get away with the atrocities that they're getting away with because there's nobody holding them accountable, and it's time that that changes. Nothing will change if the same people are in charge of the complaint process. Nothing will change if no one is holding them accountable, right? So if it's loved ones that's in that place, it makes no sense. So inmates, loved ones have the same complaint. Who is holding them accountable? And that's my main point.
And I think it's high time that we start looking at these people as the people they are. The fact is, and people have mentioned this, these people will all, almost entirely, 99% of them, be re-released back into the community once they've served their sentence. And I'm sure when they were sentenced, there was no indication that they were going to have to pay by contracting COVID-19. And the fact that the ministry continues to ensure that people will contract that, it's baffling at the lack of response, at the concealment of circumstances. Upon speaking with some of these prisoners, I was told directly that the staff said to them they didn't want to tell them what was going on because they didn't want to create panic. And so, I mean, it's time to stop hiding behind these walls and hiding behind this lack of accountability. As Zia has said, there is no governing body over corrections. Essentially, they answer their own complaints and they are accountable to no one. And so there is no influence for them to change. Even this, again, this $20 million judgment against the ministry for abusing solitary confinement. And what we're seeing today is ongoing solitary confinement. And the reality is that the ministry doesn't pay that $20 million. The taxpayers pay that $20 million. The ministry will collect it from them. And then the ministry will continue to do what they like because they haven't lost anything. So I don't see how this circumstance is going to change unless we bring in a governing body or eliminate this practice that is just simply destructive in both the short term and the long term, and it doesn't serve any purpose. We know now that prisons don't make communities safer. That's a fact. Okay, who do we have online here? Do we have any representatives from the TPRP, perhaps, who would like to say? Perhaps then we'll go to our speaker, Justin Pichet, once more for some closing words.
Okay, well, I mean, we know that we need to contain COVID, not people. We know that if we do not depopulate our prisons, both provincially and federally, to the degree that's safely possible, that these outbreaks will continue to happen. So far, I've compiled the top 27 largest outbreaks of 10 cases or more in prisons across the country. 20 of the 27 large outbreaks of 10 cases or more across the country, some of which have reached several hundred cases, have happened during the second wave of the pandemic. Things have gotten worse and governments are doing less, and they need to get to work immediately. At the provincial level, there needs to be that same urgency that there was in the early or late winter and early spring of the first wave of the pandemic, in terms of directives going out to police to release more people on their own recognizance. The message needs to be sent to Crown attorneys to work with defense attorneys to get more bail consent releases. And judges and justices of the peace need to really be again, focused on trying to get as many people bail as is safely possible, and to have the government put in place the necessary resources so that people are actually safe in the community when they need access to those resources, like housing and other kinds of supports. The ministry itself, it needs to continue to do things like temporary absences for people who are serving weekend sentences, and also looking to temporary absences for others. And the government of Ontario needs to ramp up its resourcing of the provincial parole board so that they can process more releases, something that we found out recently through the work of Indigenous Legal Services and Black, that it's actually not something that was done to the degree that could have been done during the first wave. So through combination of diversion and decarceration during the first wave of the pandemic, the province of Ontario was able to reduce its prison population by 31%. There was a report in the Toronto Star this week that said now they're hovering at 20% lower than pre-pandemic levels. We need to redouble these efforts again, or outbreaks like the Toronto South are going to continue to happen. And then in terms of what needs to happen federally, Minister Blair and his other federal cabinet team members need to look into using the royal prerogative of mercy to offer clemency on compassionate grounds for people who are heavily at risk of COVID transmission or dying from it. They need to input more resources into the Parole Board of Canada. They did a bit of that in the first wave of the pandemic. More needs to happen so we can process more hearings, so the people who can be safely released now are released, and not languishing, waiting to catch COVID, and then having prison officers coming in and out of there every day, potentially bring it back to their families, to their communities, to our communities where we all live. This is not just about what's happening behind the walls. It's how it's connected to what's happening beyond the walls as well. And, many people have been calling for other decarceration measures throughout this pandemic. Senator Kim Pate, Vice Chief Kim Bowden of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, I spoke with him yesterday. He expressed a concern of how Indigenous peoples are facing this. We know in this country, Indigenous and Black people are mass incarcerated. They're mass incarcerated. They're at the brunt of this. They're discriminated against at every stage of our criminalization and punishment system, from arrest to decisions that are made about whether or not they get parole. So again, I think if we're as a society committed to reconciliation, if we're committed to ending anti-Black racism in this country, we need to be thinking about how we can do decarceration and get to work before more people get COVID behind and beyond bars, and before more people lose their lives. There was 3 prisoners have died so far during this pandemic that we know of COVID-19. Last week, there was a staff member in Fort Saskatchewan Correctional Center that got COVID, that lost their lives. The situation is serious, and we can do something to prevent it, both from a public health perspective and a public safety perspective, because as James mentioned earlier, subjecting people to lockdowns and segregation, we know that harms people. We know that undermines community safety in the long term. So keeping people locked up the way that we are is not doing us favors, both in the short term or long term, from a public safety perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. You're right about that royal prerogative of mercy. There are a couple of circumstances that the ministry has the power to provide pardons and releases to people specifically in circumstances that were unforeseen. And I believe that's the language in the commissioner's directives. So this is definitely an unforeseen circumstance. We're putting not just the prisoners' lives at risk, we're putting the guards' lives at risk, the institutional staff, and the community that those guards are coming in and out of. This is a fiasco that needs to end. There are numerous ways to do it. Now, before we go to our direct action with our TPRP rep, Rob, I just want to ask Dee if he's got any final words to add. What do you say, Dee? Are you still there?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Did you ask a specific question, or did you
No,
want
I'm
me
just
to
wondering if before we go to our final direct action here with Rob at TPRP, if there's anything you'd like to add after having heard what you have so far.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, like, basically a couple of things I heard. With the lack of knowledge is a big thing, right? Because a lot of guards like to keep inmates in the dark, right? And you have to understand, within jail, like us inmates, like it takes a big toll on us mentally, because you have to understand the pandemic is taking toll on the world mentally. You know what I mean? Like, we're all suffering, people are suffering losses, people are dying. It's a pandemic that we haven't been able to control in our society, even outside of prison. So now you put that into the stress with what you're dealing with inside of prison and what you're going to, it takes a big toll on you mentally. So it's like the fact that, like, you know, like people, like, obviously, like what you said too, inmates don't deserve just to catch COVID just because they may have made a mistake within their lives. You know what I mean? And that's how it looks to us. You know what I'm trying to say? So, like, when it comes to even after the sentence and after this is going on, a lot of inmates may even need rehabilitation because they went through a lot of stressful things, like, you know, within their, like, what they're seeing, you know, like people are alive, like dying, catching COVID within the institutions. Family members are dying outside and they're not even able to call them. They're not even able to find out. I have people who family members have died and they weren't even able to find out till a month later because of lack of phone services due to COVID. So it's actually, you know, it takes a toll on the mental state as well. And I feel like it's something that the government and people don't even look at that. Like, how are we going to rehabilitate these inmates after they get out? Because they made a crime, yeah, they made a mistake within society, but now we want to reintegrate them. We want to help them get back into society, not make the same mistakes they made before. So when you put it in a position, us inmates, it looks like we're forgotten about by society. So that can only make it worse, not better. So if the plan is to make things better, we have to take a step of action. And that's all I want to add.
Thank you very much, Dee.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, we'll now go to Rob for our direct action. How's it going, Rob?
Perfect. Everybody can see me?
We got you.
Sorry, I was just perfect. Just going to share my screen now so people have access to the presentation with respect to the direct action. Sorry, I'm just doing this on my phone, so I'm just running in between my office right now.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
So that itself is the direct action. So I'll just run it through really quickly. So again, thank you everyone this morning for joining us for our press conference and being willing to participate in this direct action. I'm just going to speak with respect to the land acknowledgement right now. Okay. We recognize that we're in the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis people. Today is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 13, and the William Treaties. We are committed to working alongside and taking direction from the original caretakers of this land in all our calls for justice and freedom. So with respect to direct action itself, as some of the press conferences attendees mentioned before, the context is already kind of given to you guys in respect to what's going on at Toronto South and at the Toronto Joyceville Institution. I know James earlier went through the demands, so I don't want to repeat them too much as is, but with respect to the digital direct action itself, it's a three-parter. So first and foremost, it's a social media takeover. So if you see the direct action on my screen now, it's with sending Twitter messages to the provincial and federal MPs and the MP. So for Ontario, the MP of the Solicitor General is Sylvia Jones, and for the federal public safety minister is Bill Blair. So below the Twitter handles, as you see on my screen now, there are some sample tweets you could send to the MPPs and the MPs. And then underneath the sample, some of the sample tweets, which of course you can amend to reflect what you want to say, but just as sort of a template to guys get the kind of juices flowing this morning. And underneath that, there is background information on what's going on. And if you see from the statement from the Joyceville prisoners, is also linked to our website there. And then if you see under the take action, the tiny URL website itself, it will link you directly to this this toolkit per se here. You have all access to all the information you have on the screen here. So on top of the Twitter action, there also is an email zap tool, which again, you'll find the link to it in this toolkit itself. And last, but definitely not least, is the flooding their phone lines. So what you want to do is contact the Ontario and federal counterparts, so their MPPs in your region, which you could use the website locator code there, as well as the members of parliament on the federal level, which again, you could search up via your postal code with that website there. Again, in conjunction, if you do get a phone call or you get through something, in the itself, there is the Google Forms. So if you could just fill out your name, who you called, what they said, if they said anything, just so we can have a record of what exactly the MPs and the MPPs are doing when we do call them. And just underneath the Google form, I guess, survey of sorts there is a sample script. Please definitely amend it to reflect what you want to say. But again, it just kind of get there. You at least have a template to go if we do get a hold of these people or MPPs. And then last but certainly not least, underneath the email zap under the toolkit, there is some kind of remarks in terms of what regular pushback you might get when talking about releasing prisoners from institutions. So for example, like why should prisoners get access to the vaccine? Again, just underneath those three separate questions, there are three separate bullet points to try to get you to walk through that, so to speak. But yeah, again, thank you everybody for joining this morning. I know it was an early start, but again, prisoners need our support, needs our help to kind of heed their calls and heed their demands, and with respect to what's going on with COVID in institutions. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, James.
My pleasure.
Sorry, I just stopped sharing my screen here.
Yeah.
It lets me do it. Let's see. Sorry. That's weird. It's not letting me exit on my screen, which is great.
So we'll leave the floor open now. If anyone has any further questions, given the information we've heard, a lot of this information is quite shocking. And again, I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. I think it's important that we understand that even though these are people who have made poor choices and have offended, that they are still a part of our community and will return to our community. And we are all responsible for the outcomes that result from this practice of punishment and what is supposed to be rehabilitation. And so we are all responsible for speaking out if about our opinions about what's going on. If people feel that what's happening isn't safe, isn't healthy, isn't moral, isn't legal, then feel free to have your voice heard, to contact your MPs and your MPPs using the direct action digital toolkit that Rob just shared. You can find that through a TPRP website. Contact us if you need any support with that. We're more than willing to help. And on that note, I think that brings our press conference today to a close. So I want to thank all of our speakers, Dee, Mia, Zia, Justin, Piche, Rob, and Rua for keeping us all organized, and everyone for watching and getting out there and doing what's right.